Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first official Built by Builders webinar, The State of Construction in 2025, Where We Are and Where We're Headed. My name is Matt Tebow, and I'm a reporter with Construction Dive, where I cover construction technology and the changing industry landscape. The AEC industry has seen lots of change over the past few years. Regulations come and gone, the looming threat of tariffs, and a new American presidential administration come to mind, among a few other things. With new challenges and innovations constantly reshaping the market, the question on every builder's mind is, where do we stand now and where are we headed next? To answer that, the 8 inaugural Built by Builders members, CEOs, and founders from some of the most widely known companies in construction tech are here to dole out their knowledge. They'll be sharing their insights on the biggest challenge companies are facing today and for the future of the industry. We're going to begin with a quick introduction of our panelists. So first, Cameron, would love to hear from you to start.
Awesome. Yeah, nice to meet everyone. My name is Cameron Page. I'm the CEO and founder of Clearstory. We are a change order communication and workflow tool that was really built by my experience in the industry. I was a general contractor, project manager for about a decade in Silicon Valley. And my biggest challenge was I wanted to understand my cost exposure at any point in time. And to do that, I had to do a bunch of manual work. I had to email my trade partners for a change order log. I had to find out how many T&M tickets had been signed for. We had to check our whole team's inbox. And so, really that in the field experience is what led to starting Clearstory 7 years ago. And I think it's really resonated with the industry since. And joining Built by Builders, I think as you'll hear today, there's a lot of other companies with similar background.
All right, excellent, Cameron. Thank you. Chris, why don't you go next?
Hey, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Cowan. I'm founder and CEO here at Plot. I spent my entire life in the construction industry, kind of involuntarily forced into it at an early age, and eventually took over my family's concrete construction company before doing technology startups. So Plot is our current company, focusing on delivery logistics and procurement scheduling, basically combining everything that you would do in a logistics plan PDF, delivery whiteboard, and a procurement log spreadsheet into a centralized automated and synchronized service. So pleasure to meet everyone and looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks a ton, Chris. Gabe, you're up next.
Thanks, Matt. Excited to be here. I'll continue the trend. My name's Gabe Guetta, CEO and co-founder of Salus, and we focus on safety management software, really focus on the field level worker, empowering them and pushing up to the office. My background as well is in construction. I started as a laborer in construction, worked my way up to running a construction company. And then through the evolution of safety and the changes to more of a compliance-based safety, really created a lot of pain for our company, a lot of pain for those 55-year-old construction workers having to fill out paper documents all of a sudden. And a fairly significant incident forced us to up our game, and we couldn't find anything on the market that could help us. And so that's where the journey of myself and my co-founder was to create Salus. Thanks, Matt.
All right, thanks a ton, Gabe. Joseph, why don't you go ahead and pop on next?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. Excited to be here. My name is Joe Leva. I am the co-founder and CEO here at Caster. I've got over 15 years experience as a subcontractor working on some of the nation's largest P3 public works, DOT, and infrastructure jobs. And so, my experience as a subcontractor is the burden of compliance and contract administration and working with several GCs simultaneously with different compliance and contract and agency requirements and kind of the plight of managing that on several jobs. And so that experience led me to develop Caster, which is a subcontractor compliance platform that leverages AI and automation to streamline workflows like certified payrolls, workforce reporting, insurance, lower tier tracking, and owner-specific documentation all in one place. So excited to join the rest of the crew here on today's discussion.
Thanks a ton, Joe. Josh, feel free to hop on next.
Hey everybody, Josh Levy, co-founder and CEO of Document Crunch. As is a familiar theme, I didn't come to this as a technologist. I spent over a decade as a construction attorney and executive in the industry. And what I really came to appreciate was the contract and other documents like specifications or soil reports or whatever are at the core of every single workflow that we go through in our industry. And there's really a disconnect from those folks that are negotiating or setting up those documents in the back office with those who need to understand those risks or those documents in the field every day. It's really at the core of every single claim or fee erosion or worse litigation that takes place in our industry. And so Document Crunch is really here to empower everybody in the industry to not only understand these documents, but to make better and more informed decisions around these documents every single day. And thanks for having me. Of
course, Josh. Patrick, why don't you help on next?
Awesome. Thank you. Patrick Murphy, founder, CEO of Toggle AI. We use AI to automate takeoffs. And again, similar to everybody, grew up in a family construction business. First job was a day laborer, worked in the field, then worked in pre-con in the accounting department. Used to do takeoffs with my grandfather 25 years ago with a scale ruler like this on printed plans. Did that for a bit. CPA by training, worked at Deloitte, and then served in Congress from 2012 to 2016. Spent a lot of time learning about AI and crypto and future of work, and rejoined our family construction business, Coastal Construction, in about 2018, and realized that the single biggest piece of overhead in our business was estimating. Biggest piece of that was takeoffs. So had an idea to use AI to automate that. So took about 3 years to build it and been in the market for a couple of years now. So thank you, Matt, and thank you to all.
All right, thanks, Patrick. Steve, why don't you hop on?
Thanks, Matt. Yes, Steve Delorto, the CEO and founder of Concentric. We're the first AI pre-construction management platform focused on unifying the entirety of the pre-construction process, the stakeholders, and all the planning that goes on to make a construction project successful. Started Concentric because after 26 years in the business as an exec leading a ENR top 10 general contractor, I just saw an enormous need and opportunity to modernize pre-construction and really make life a lot easier and more predictable for everybody involved, the stakeholder, the builder, and all the way down to the individual. And so it's really about predictable outcomes and leveraging technology to really improve a process that's so critical. It's actually the most critical stage in the project delivery lifecycle. So thanks for having me today, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. And let's round out our panelists with Tom.
Thanks, Matt. Hey, guys. My name is Tom Dean. I'm the co-founder and CEO at ProjectMark. We are a modern CRM platform for the construction industry. Like everybody else, spent a lot of time in the industry. Patrick, I'd love to see the scale ruler. I hadn't used that in a number of years, but yeah, spent over 10 years in the United States. I started my career in Dublin, Ireland, but something that I was massively passionate about was business development, relationship development. How do we win the next job? How do we communicate our value prop in the project interview situation? And felt like there was just no modern CRM system out there for the doer-seller business developer that is in construction. So that's why I'm here and excited to be here as well with the rest of the group. Thanks, Matt.
All right, thanks, Tom. And now that you've heard from all of our panelists, just a couple quick housekeeping things before we get to the rest of the webinar. First things first, we're going to take this in two parts. First, we're going to talk about the current state of construction, and then we're going to talk about the future of the construction industry. So those are going to be our two big focuses here. Additionally, if you have any questions, please feel free to send in those questions via the Q&A box. We are going to have a Q&A period at the end of the webinar where we'll take a look at a few of those and get our panelists to answer some of those. So without further ado, let's pop into part one here on the current state of the construction industry. So we finished off the first quarter of 2025. The industry is being battered by a litany of issues, regulations, executive orders, labor shortages, tariffs, the list goes on. So with all of these factors in play, I want to turn to our panel and ask, what are the biggest problems that you see contractors face right now, and what do they need to be prepared to do to keep themselves afloat? Steve, why don't you start us off?
Yeah, well, there's definitely a lot of stuff in the news, and it's at times it feels a little crazy, but I think as you're planning projects, the identification of risks and the things that could threaten the success of the project or your company, the earlier you identify them and the earlier you put mitigation plans in place, the better off you're going to be. Our industry is quite resilient. You know, we handle the ups and downs of recessions and, you know, politics, et cetera. So, you know, I think we're used to this and we can handle this as an industry, but it just does get down to the quality of the effort and what the companies are doing to, you know, prevent that from affecting their company, from, you know, affecting their projects. But I think our industry is a little bit more challenged these days than it ever has been, with having enough people and the right kind of people to actually think through these complex issues and plan for success despite what they're facing. So it's like dual challenges. You're dealing with the issues coming at you, the macro issues coming at you today, but at the same time, what are you doing to retool your business to make sure that you're winning work and you remain competitive and you remain profitable, and you're doing that while you don't exactly have the benefit of a lot of resources at your fingertips these days. So I think the things that the smart companies are doing are looking at technology and looking at data in order to get around or get ahead of some of these issues, to make their projects successful and to make their companies successful.
All right, thanks for that insight, Steve. Josh, why don't you go ahead and head us up next?
Yeah, I mean, I'll piggyback on what Steve said, and the idea that our industry is resilient and we're capable of weathering any and all kinds of conditions. But look, my fundamental learning, having done this for over a decade on billions of dollars of projects, is knowledge is power. Making informed decisions is powerful. I mean, that's really what Document Crunch was founded for. But perhaps you asked what the current state of affairs is. I mean, the most acute issue I've actually seen in my 6 years doing this is happening right now, and perfectly illustrative with these tariffs. So, you know, a lot of people think about, well, how's that going to increase the price of construction? And, you know, if I was in Steve's world and what his platform is doing, I would start, you know, thinking about that. Of course, you want to set up your contracts the right way to make provision for that, you know, maybe contingency of the fact that we may have some price escalation or volatility. That's all well and good, and getting ahead of that is good. But what I'm actually seeing and what I'm concerned about for our industry with these tariffs is not the projects that have yet to start or have yet to have contracts signed, but actually those that are under construction right now, where there may be firm fixed pricing and there may, you know, be promises that have been made around material delivery or whatnot, or who bears the responsibility for that. And what I'm seeing, you know, which is acute, is you've got to very quickly understand what the obligations are that the project team has, because this situation has happened now. And you've got to make decisions very quickly to mitigate this risk. And so I think about, you know, this is obviously a very important time for our industry, and this is really what's on my mind. So my short answer is tariffs, 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 as a microcosm for making sure that you are informed and you understand the risks. And our industry is resilient, and we can do everything and anything as long as you don't bury your head in the sand, but get ahead and understand the risks and work as a team. So tariffs is my final answer. That's what I'm thinking about these days.
And we'll lock you in for that final answer too. Cameron, why don't you go ahead and let us know what you have to say next?
Yeah, I think they're both, you know, good points. And I think, to echo what Steve and Josh both said, is our industry is super resilient. And, you know, I started my career in 2009, right, when the industry was melting and we never thought anything would be built ever again. And guess what? Here we are, you know, 15 years later, and things are still getting built, right? And builders figured out ways around it. And that doesn't mean things were easy, right? But we figured things out. And so, you know, I think Steve's point on better pre-construction and planning, especially projects that are going into construction now, like how are you mitigating those risks of what price increases might look like, things like that. And obviously Josh's point about understanding your contracts is super important as well. You know, our point of view and my lived experience is one of the biggest challenges. Things change on projects. That just happens no matter what, whether it's, you know, weather delays. You know, we might get a bunch of weather in the next like 2 years also. We're not talking about that today, but, you know, ultimately, you know, things change on projects, and the speed at which you can visualize what those cost impacts are allows you to make informed decisions on how to move the project forward, how to keep your client up to date, how to keep your subcontractors paid. And the challenge is what we call the change order gap at Clearstory, is really there's a lack of visibility between stakeholders on what's outstanding. And our current state of companies solving this gap is Excel spreadsheets and change order logs that get emailed back and forth. And so, I think like when we're on here with this like panelist of technology companies, I think I like to think of technology and construction as peaks and potholes. And like what you're hearing about is like robotics and AI and machine learning and all these peaks of technology that are driving us forward. There's a lot of potholes in our industry that we still have not yet solved with technology. And I think a lot of the companies here are solving like potholes that are right in front of us. And really, unless you've been in the industry, you like wouldn't really understand how big of a pothole it actually is. And so, I think at a high level, that's kind of the state of the industry is we've got a lot of potholes to fix. But as we always do, we're going to figure it out without them. But I think there's a big opportunity for technology to come in and smooth a lot of that out and make these bumpy times even easier to manage.
Great. Thanks, Cameron. Gabe, let's go over to you and let us know what you think.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I agree with what everyone's saying. I think that those are all big problems in the industry. I think some of them are things that constantly happen. I mean, we're always dealing with ups and downs, material costs, construction being more expensive. I want to pull the attention to the field. I come from the field, labor to really, I lived in the field, went to window installation after that. And I think we got a big problem there, short term and long term. We have an issue with the knowledge gap, people retiring, less people going into construction. Every company, every leader that you talk to in construction is terrified of the labor shortage that's coming. We can win jobs. How are we going to do these jobs? We can, put all this money into the pre-construction side, all this stuff that's happening around drawings and technology in the office, which is needed. It's great, but there's almost nothing going into the field. And I think as an industry, we got to start focusing on empowering the field. We have to, not just the superintendent, we have to figure out how to empower the labor, the carpenter, the electrician, the form worker. How do we create this value exchange where it's not just this top-down approach where we're going from the office, which I ended up in my career in the office, and it didn't take me long to forget about what the field is going through and just start pushing this top-down approach. How do we empower that worker to feel enabled to do their job properly and proud of what they've done at the end of their career? And what I'm trying to do with what excites me about what we're doing in health and safety is health and safety struggles with similar issues as software in the field. Software is very hard in the field. It breaks in the field. It's not this intuitive approach, right? But the data's in the dirt. Like all the stuff that we do in construction is in the dirt. The execution phase is where we start to fail and where all these delays happen. And so what I like about health and safety is it's dealing with a similar issue where we have this top-down approach for health and safety where we're starting to just push down on them, fill out this form, do this thing, check this box. And at the field level, they're just closing their eyes a lot of times and doing it and not realizing why they're doing it. And so we got to pivot this mindset to creating it more intuitively. Can you get a trade worker to reach for their phone or reach for safety as intuitively as they reach for their hammer? You don't have to tell a trade worker to use their hammer at 8 a.m. every morning or at 9 a.m. on a Friday, right? They're intuitively doing that. And so I think if we can create that value exchange and find a way for that trade work in the field to naturally reach for their software and safety and start operationalizing that, we've changed the way that construction works. Now that's a vision, that's a could be a long ways away, but I think we got to shift that focus to the field and start creating the excitement at the field level.
All right, thanks, Gabe. We've got a few more minutes left in this section, so if anybody else has any other thoughts they'd love to share with our audience, please feel free to do so.
Matt, I would add the purpose of this organization too is, you've heard from an array of different companies and different backgrounds. And as we do as an industry face these uncertain times, like we always do, each company, construction owner, developer, architect, it doesn't matter. Everybody really needs to start preparing for the future because the futures already taking a different shape. And to do that, you definitely have to have technology as part of your overall solution, toolbox, if you will. So hopefully, the backgrounds and the input that everybody's getting out of this engagement is, starting to turn on the light bulb and light the fire to really more proactively start to change the trajectory of your own approach and your company's approach to make yourself a little bit more future proof. Because if anything, this day and age is proving to you things are changing more and more rapidly each and every day, and you need to be prepared for it.
I think that makes sense, Steve. I think I'll just add maybe one thing there. I think the industry is so intuitive when it comes to building. Nothing is off the table when we have problems in front of us and we're building things, planning things, everything else. But for some reason, when it comes to software, we almost shut down. I'm not talking on the software side. I'm talking about when I was in the construction side. We don't naturally start thinking of software in the same way. How can we solve these problems as open-minded as we do when we're building and solving problems in the field or even in the drawing phase or whatever it may be? And I think the industry just needs to shift their mindset a little bit around software can solve so many problems. Start looking at the things that right in front of you and think, can software help me solve this problem? And I think the efficiency and the progress we'll make as an industry in construction is going to be unstoppable if we start opening our mind to that.
Great. Thanks a ton to the both of you. With that takes us right to time on this. We're going to move ahead to our second section on the future of the industry. Looking ahead, right? The big question that on everybody's mind is what do you predict will be the next big tech trends of the next 4 years? And how can contractors prepare to meet that moment in the future starting right now? Patrick, would love to hear what you have to say on this to start us off.
Sure, thank you. I just saw this in the chat, actually. AI, robotics, AI agents, coding, it's all changing so fast. Just yesterday, some of our team was in town from Europe, and with natural language, within 30 seconds, we coded a new estimating tool, right? Something that would have taken months or years to do in the past is now being done with natural language. You do not have to be a technical developer anymore to come up with a new product. You don't have to be a technical developer to do a website anymore. The limitation is creativity. So just going on what Gabe just said there, for those of you, listening to this that are in the field that have an idea, start experimenting, start learning some of these new AI tools, and in natural language, you can develop your own app, right? You can develop your own tool. Really exciting stuff happening, and still the early days of this. And look, I think we all know the stats, right? Construction over the last 50 years has had a 0% increase in productivity, right? That's shameful, right? There's a lot of reasons for it we can talk about, but we can do better. And I believe that technology is now not only here, but affordable to process the nuances in construction, right? And in many ways, I think that's what's been holding us back. And I think all the sort of problems that were outlined in the first part there, Matt, with tariffs, deportations, immigration issues, lack of skilled labor, uncertainty, political chaos, high interest rates, like all these things together are, I think, going to put a lot of pressure on construction around price and constraints and pushing contractors to be more efficient, to be faster, to hit their budgets and be, under scheduled, because otherwise the jobs just aren't penciling. So if we're going to get a job, we're going to have to be smarter in order to get that. And I think that's going to sort of force our hand to adapt technology faster. So, our company's AI, we're taking a task that used to take days or weeks, right, and a takeoff, and now we're doing it in seconds with AI. Same thing for code compliance, right? Fire, life safety, ADA. Why in the world are we having humans today draw lines to get to the exit to see if it's, more or less than 300 feet? Fire sprinkler locations, egress, dead end, right? All this stuff is math. It's very easily solved with AI. So I think we're going to see a wave of new technologies. And I think a lot of people on this call that aren't necessarily panelists have the tools to develop their own weapons, basically, to make them more efficient. So very excited about the future.
All right. Thanks a ton, Patrick. Joe, let's hear from you next.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if the people that are here today on the webinar, you're already at a head start. You're tuning into what's in the latest and greatest with all the panelists here that have great technology kind of moving things forward. So you're off to a great start. If you want to prepare, spread the word. I think contractors should familiarize themselves more with how AI works, whether it's a chat GPT and how prompts work, and start testing things out to kind of ease into it. Looking ahead over the next few years, from the subcontractor lens, I see a willingness to adopt these modern technologies. I think the notion of subcontractors, they won't log in, they won't do X, Y, and Z. I think that's changing, and we're seeing it on what's happening with our client base as well. And so what we're seeing is more AI, more automation, empowering subcontractors, improving transparency and accountability industry wide. We're going to see a proliferation of AI tools with large language models are going to be intricate enough. They're going to be more subcontractor requirement specific. They're going to be have that deep knowledge and understanding. So I see more adoption of this faster than ever before. Things that traditional SaaS was unable to solve are now going to be solved by AI and these automation tools. So I see that happening going forward. And given my experience as a subcontractor, when it comes to things like compliance on DOT or government or agency jobs, it's complex, and it's really boiled down to the continuation of three problems. Number one is that the requirements are complex, they're ever changing. Number two, they're fragmented systems. Each owner, each jurisdiction, each city, each general contractor has their own set of requirements and their own way of doing things. And so as a sub, you have to constantly adapt to these, ever-changing workflows. And then, when it comes to this stuff, there's a lot of interdependency going on, right? You've got insurance, you've got accounting, you've got legal, you've got project control. So any hiccup along the way creates a bottleneck. And so I think with more integrated systems, with more automated workflows, we avoid these pitfalls and bottlenecks. And as a subcontractor, any bottleneck impacts payments on a monthly basis. This impacts cash flow, which is detrimental to your payroll, renting equipment, and so forth. And so some of the impacts I see going forward are a shift in automation that takes things from reactive to a more proactive process. I see unlocking faster payment cycles, no more bottlenecks. I see reduced risk exposure for owners, subs, and GCs alike. And frankly, going forward, I hope to see a future that's brighter, where subs can go back to focusing on their craft, their specialty trade, and less on manual stuff.
All right, thank you very much, Joe. Chris, would love to hear from you next.
No, it's been really interesting to hear from all the panelists, and also keep track of the conversation going on in the Q&A. To us, we've really seen that, I've been in the industry for a long time, and I've seen multiple generations of these softwares come through. And what we've largely seen to date is this digitization of analog workflows, and that has made a massive leap forward in productivity as it pertains to that area. But what I really think we start to see is, now that we have digitized workflows, we have a whole new level of collaboration. So not only are we communicating more with our data, but more and more the actual communication from stakeholders between the different subcontractors, the general contractor, the suppliers, the owners, is happening through the software platforms rather than with data. And I think that is key to unlocking a myriad of different benefits. And a lot of it comes down to, I think it's been in the chat, is the fact that those coming into the industry are those digital natives. They have not known a world that every touch point they have in their day-to-day lives has some sort of digital backbone. They have a conversation with a friend, and then they go and they share that experience on a social media site, or they go to book a haircut and they're not picking up the phone. They're going and they're picking a date available from a website. And so we've really seen that there's been a pretty significant shift from the ability to interact with data to interact with actual other individuals, and that workflow is happening throughout a platform rather than person-to-person communication. And I think that those coming into the industry, they expect that. And when they see an industry that does not have tools built in, they see it as a inferior or a behind the eight ball type of process. But I think that leads into another area of a new level of integration. And I hope that the legacy partners continue on their investment to continue to allow our tools to talk to each other, because that creates a matrix opportunity of this tool handling X and that tool handling Y can have a net benefit by combining their data to be able to see plan versus actual in a verifiable way. And that is a very massive opportunity, because all of these little touch points, all these little workflows are deep, they're complicated, they need to be structured, but they need to be flexible. And no single tool is really going to be able to do everything. And being able to intermix the data and the workflows between those tools is key to allowing us to extend not only general contractor and subcontractor relationships, but now extending to the supply chain. A lot of our tool is starting to integrate our schedules beyond those individuals that touch the job site daily, and to those individuals that might touch the job site for 30 minutes to offload some material there. And really looking at not only the installation schedule that is given so much attention, but given the same amount of attention to a supply chain schedule that today is completely kind of made up in the minds of the individuals on the site, and allowing a digital platform to capture that, to communicate that is massively valuable. And I'll double click on a point that Gabe made earlier, all about these workflows allow us to capture data at the work face in the field that is not calculated today. And that finally allows us a feedback loop to be able to start to do the type of post-mortem analytics to see what is working, what is not, and where can we start to really moneyball our construction projects to identify opportunities for gains. But it really is a decentralized effort. I think it takes a lot of different individuals, and that's why I love this group, is we have so many different perspectives. We have people that disagree with each other, and that is absolutely necessary in order to move the entire industry forward.
All right, thanks, Chris. Tom, why don't you go ahead and round us out here?
Yeah, I would just echo the guys on AI. I think AI is here, and AI is going to transform almost every single workflow in the space, especially in the construction management side of things. So I think what you would see 5 or 10 years ago is the big brand name general contractors having innovation departments and directors of innovation. I think every single construction company needs a task force, one person dedicated to understanding the technology that's out there in the landscape, but more importantly on the AI side of things and what's changing. I think going back to Cameron, what you'd mentioned about peaks and potholes, I think that's just a really interesting observation. With AI, it doesn't have to always be the peak, right? It's these simple applications, it's contract review, it's takeoffs, it's understanding meeting minutes and making sure that your document, there's simple workflows out there today that could transform your day-to-day workflow and mitigate risk and remove the change order, the back and forth, or the finger pointing. From a business development perspective, we're keeping it simple with our AI application. If you think about all business development is done in person, done at networking events, how do we capture that information and bring it in and then start to learn from that information from historical data and things like that? And I think, on the response and all things pre-construction, I think there's a massive opportunity to not only transform the speed and velocity of responding to bids, but also how we communicate and how we articulate our value prop. If we have, a great central data system, is a PDF, response the way forward, or is it video content and things like that? So I think there's going to be a lot of evolvement in how construction companies can leverage AI to communicate why they're qualified. But yeah, I think the overarching message from me is every single construction company out there needs somebody dedicated to looking at what's around the corner, because it's here and it's only going to continue to evolve.
All right, thanks very much, Tom. Once again, we've got a few minutes left here to chat a little bit more, but before we get into that, after this, we're going to be going into the open Q&A portion. So I see a lot of different questions flying by in the chat. That's excellent. Throw those into the Q&A panel. We'll be happy to take a look at those, go through them in the structured session. And with that, I open the floor up to all of our panelists. We've heard a lot of really interesting information. Is there anything anyone would like to add?
I would like to just say on this future state, going back to this idea of like this industry and what the opportunity is, we talk a lot about risk. But I think, we should be talking about opportunity. And I think someone had asked this question about, is there an acceleration of technology taking place? But I think that this industry can be more profitable, and there's just not a better way that I can say it. And I think what we're learning now, and someone was talking about, I guess some people are younger and having different experiences than folks that have been in the industry for a while, but we have a real opportunity now to engage this sea change in technology and this proliferation of great solutions, like some of the folks on this panel, but others as well, to become a more profitable industry. And when you take a step back and you understand that opportunity exists, I would just challenge everybody to say, well, why not? Why can't we be more profitable? Because we're seeing it play out in real time. And I just think when you think about the future of construction, there's just never been a more ripe period of time than with some of the advances in technology that will accrue to the benefit of the industry if you find the right providers to work with to solve real problems for you.
Yeah, I
I'll
think.
jump in if I can, Matt.
Oh, go ahead, Patrick.
Oh, sorry, Gabe. Yeah, just real quick. Read something interesting on that point, Josh, just to add to it, that it's interesting how AI and these large language models are really going after the doctors, the lawyers, the accountants, all these so-called knowledge workers, right? And doing a great job of that. But what's really harder, and I think is going to take a lot longer, is the mechanics and the plumbers and the laborers and the folks on the job that are doing these unbelievable installations. And there's an argument that actually those folks that are working with those hands, they're skilled workers, are going to become a lot more valuable much faster here because they're going to be harder for robots and other things to replace. So we'll see how it plays out, but it's definitely a transformative time we're living in.
Okay, I think I'll just.
The thing I was going to add, or go ahead, Gabe.
No,
I
you go,
forgot
Cameron.
you were next. I was going to make a quick observation to kind of piggyback on what Patrick said earlier about AI and natural language allowing people to like build software that aren't, native programmers themselves. I think one of the cool things about this whole group here is that we were all construction professionals. None of us were software engineers, yet we all started software companies. Although I don't think any of us are actual coders. I don't think any of us made that transition. So we hired people. But and probably one of the more interesting things for me coming into the software world was just how many tools there are on the market to solve every single problem that a software company might have. And I think the reason why that happens is because in every software company that's selling software to other software companies, there's a group of developers in that company who see that problem firsthand, and on nights and weekends, build a solution for it, and then they go spin that out into a company. And what that creates in that market is a bunch of competition, which competition means the best product usually wins. And so it drives this like great innovation that I just don't think we necessarily have the same thing in construction. So hopefully with the advent of AI and these other tools, we can get more competition in our space. Part of Clearstory is digital T&M tickets, which our biggest competitor still is triplicate carbon copy paper. Like we'd love to have more competitors like doing what we're doing, which would drive us to be even better. And when we think about solving workforce challenges, I think, software only plays a small role, but what I will say is software does help the back office be more efficient and make more educated plans, which then makes the field more efficient at executing the work. And so I don't think software is a silver bullet by any means, but it should drive towards better, workforce management and things like that. So anyways, Gabe, sorry, that was a bit of a rant, but
No, all
ahead,
good,
Gabe.
man. All good. It was well said. I think we all need to remember what it is that we do here. Construction is here to build, right? And that's where the money is made, is in the building phase, the constructing phase. Unfortunately, there is so many barriers to get to that phase, right? It's getting harder and harder, more and more complex, more and more regulation compliance aspects. And there's reason for that, right? Buildings are getting more complicated, all the rest of that the stuff associated with that. And I think everybody on this call is trying to figure out how to make that more efficient and use technology to do that, because there's so many mundane tasks that are associated with so many of these phases before you get to the build side. And we have to keep striving to push towards that. But we also have to remember, and talking about what technology can start to do and start to unlock, that's one aspect, right? I think right now there's about 70% of the workforce that is in the field and 30% in the office. I think it should be 85% is in the field and 15% in the office. And some people might not like that statement, but that is where the efficiency is. That's where we need to focus, is the money is made in the field, executing. The other side of this that is interesting, that hasn't been introduced in the history of construction, is the data that can start to be pulled out of the stuff that we're doing in construction. Like I said before, the data's in the dirt. And so with AI and other technology that is coming out, we actually have the ability to start unlocking insight that we've never had in construction before. But I think I'd say to any construction company out there, you have to start shifting your mind to, how are you collecting the data? What's the integrity of the data that's going in? Garbage in, garbage out. How do you actually create this value exchange between your workforce, whether it's in the office or in the field, where they're bought in to this vision and what you're doing around innovation and how it benefits them? Because if they're just going through these processes with software and checking boxes and closing their eyes, you talk about data or AI all day long, but that's not going to help any data vision you have in the future if you're not getting quality data in. So I would say really focus on not just the top of your company, all the way through your company, shifting your culture to be excited about innovation and start adopting and seeing where they benefit. It can't just be a top-down approach all the way through the office down to the field. It doesn't work. So that's what I would say around that, Matt.
All right, awesome. Thanks a ton, everybody. That's a lot of great information. We're gonna move to the Q&A segment of the webinar now. If you have any questions, throw them in the Q&A tab. We've got a couple lined up here that I'm really excited to hear our panelists talk about. And the first one I want to talk to is something that I think people in the chat have been mentioning about, like specifically like the labor on the job site. If this was your question, please type it in the chat. So if people would like to follow up with you, they can. But this person asks, while we continue discussing workforce challenges in construction, we seem caught in a cycle of talk without meaningful action due to tight timelines and margins. I'm curious, if we could precisely identify where our specific skill gaps and labor shortages exist, couldn't we make more strategic investments in robotics and AI automation to supplement these areas? Rather than broad workforce discussions, shouldn't we map our actual talent landscape to determine exactly where tech can most efficiently address our shortages and what's preventing us from taking this more targeted approach to solve our workforce challenges? And with that, I yield the floor. Who would like to take a whack at this first?
Yeah, I'll jump in with my 2 cents, specifically about that last part of the question of what's the preventative of that. And you can look at it 2 ways. What area deserves the most attention? What needs backfilling versus where do we actually think robotics can be efficient and therefore profitable? And I think we've seen this. I think we've seen at least a couple generations of construction robotics go through already. And the ones that live on today are the dirty, the dangerous, and the dull activities on the job site. And I think this all goes into the conversation of how do we use technology to assist in the labor shortage, whether it be a physical robot or a digital robot. We need to put it in the areas that are not the skills that can be done or should be done by decision makers or craftsmen and women in the field. And if we can figure out where those tools can go out and do those activities, it not only takes a task out of an individual's workflow that they can go do something, and it performs a force multiplier function of the workforce we have, but it also makes that job, that person's role, their day-to-day activity, that much more enjoyable. And maybe enjoyable is not the right word to use in construction, but it makes it less dangerous, it makes it less dull, and it makes it just a little bit more enticing to those that are choosing this industry versus another. And so I definitely agree with you that highlighting where's the biggest hole, and therefore we should go there. I would actually counter and say there is very few areas that today's robotics can go out there and be profitable and actually make an impact in the labor market and the roles that a typical person does on a day-to-day on a job site. And we're going to see rebar tying robots. We're going to see long haul automated equipment. We're going to see drywallers. We're going to see painters. We're going to see all of those activities, but you're not replacing a drywall. You're not replacing, a concrete contractor, rod buster. You're going in there and you're replacing the worst 20% of their job and allowing them to do something else, something that requires decision making or requires craft.
Chris, I think that was awesome because from spending, I started my career, I spent 2.5 years as a laborer working into being, ideally, I was a carpenter and a superintendent. And I hated my job for the first year and a half. It was horrible. I was in the trenches at the bottom of a high-rise pit, digging ditches, all this other stuff, water control. And I would look at my clock every 15 minutes and I thought it was 4 hours later. And it was brutal. And so I think exactly what you're saying is right. I don't see construction getting rid of people in the field anytime soon. It can't happen. It won't happen. But we have to absolutely empower them to have better experiences in the field and feel more empowered and make their jobs easier and try and introduce some level of work-life balance, which, by the way, does not exist in construction for the most part. And so that's how you're starting to attract more and more people to the industry. And I think we need more PR and everything else at elementary school all the way through. But the work environment right now is tough for the most part. And we have to start focusing on how to make that easier and sexier for the rest of for people that want to come into the industry. And maybe they can leave the industry with still being able to play catch with their kids, right? Because their bodies are not so beat up from it. And so I love what you said there, Chris.
Yep. Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
and Gabe, I would just to add to that, I would say, oh, sorry, Matt. Just 2 seconds. I was going to add to that too. Like, I think the same problem manifests itself in the office as well. I started as a laborer also, and I, hated it, and I moved into a carpenter. But when I went to be a project manager at a large general contractor, I saw young field engineers and young project engineers like equally pained of like boredom and manual work in their job. I mean, hiring somebody out of college who's excited to go build something and give them a stack of submittals to go manually compile to bring to the next OAC meeting is soul crushing. And I think, that's like part of our challenge is how do we not only get people into the industry, but how do we keep them in? And, again, I think there's a role for technology to play there, but it's not a silver bullet. There's a lot that has to go into it.
Yep. Thanks for that, Cam. We're going to move on to the next question that kind of ties into this very well. How can technology help bridge the knowledge gap between retiring workers and new entrants to the construction industry? This user tried to correct for this by documenting lessons learned from previous projects, but it's not the most intuitive tool for knowledge sharing. So I'd love to hear what y'all have to think on that.
Yeah, Matt, we see in pre-construction, what I saw during my whole career is, as you're in the construction phase, the processes, the tools that you have, a little bit more standardized. And then pre-con, as the industry has shifted and you're doing more and more of the collaborative interactions with the architect, the owner, there have not been really much in the way of standardization and advancements in that realm. And so as you have very, experienced people now coming upon retirement, they have enormous amounts of valuable information, pricing data. I mean, I worked with guys that could go into a room and talk about an office building, and they could just rattle off how much the different components of a project might cost on a dollar per square foot basis. And, it takes time for that to really accumulate in your brain. But when these people leave, all of that's leaving with them. And none of that, very little of that information is truly reposited in a structured way for other people to access it and use it and for it to be synthesized. And so this knowledge transfer is a huge deal because a third of the workforce is scheduled to retire and be completely out of the work here in the next 2-3 years. I mean, it is on our front doorstep, and there's been very little progress made in truly bringing that knowledge, institutionalizing it so that the person that you hire, that's fresh out of school or the trades coming to do their job, that information is, needs to be where they can grab it, They can be guided by digitized best practices, because you as the employer want to have them go to work and do the work in a controlled, predictable way. But if everything's ad hoc spreadsheets and made up, processes, and even to call it a process is giving it a little bit too much credit, you're really, really, your people are kind of making it up as they go along. And when you're talking about planning a project where the margins are razor thin, and the risks are huge, both contractual but also the workforce building the job, you got a lot going into this that should not be founded on a wing and a prayer and ad hoc spreadsheets. And so that's where I think technology, all the things that we're doing, and just bringing more attention to how do we take all of these great ideas, the knowledge I think Gabe was talking about, when you work on a project today, if you do something with the data and gather that information, how does that provide insights and give you a leg up for the next project and the project after that? That flywheel effect only comes when you can actually get that data, structure it, and put it in a place that's accessible for people to do things with it. Whether you're building, workflows, digitized workflows, tapping that data, AI solutions, you name it, you have to start with the data and pulling it together and structuring it in a way that you can do something with it. And that's like first base for everybody across the board. That affects safety, that affects coordinating logistics on the job site, that affects, building plans on how to build the job from a cost, risk, schedule, sequencing perspective. It touches everything in our business.
Hey, I think
Thanks.
though, I think another thing to consider, and why this network, the Built by Builders network, is frankly important to me, is one thing that I've learned, and we see this with a lot of our customers too, but I learned this in my prior life. A lot of the big sophisticated contractors, they have these processes and they likely have documented these processes. The vast majority of the industry, this lives in their head. And I think the point here is you should also be holding vendors like us accountable to have an opinion of what good looks like out of the box, because that standardization, we can help as long as we understand the problems that we're solving for. And so we've seen that, in my experience now in this space, we've seen, like, we define the process. And of course, you want to make provision for, your ability to put your own secret sauce or your own special, twist on it. And so that is something that, we have to think about every day. But I do think that that's like the big difference. So you can go to ChatGPT and you can ask ChatGPT any question you want, and you can get any answer you want back in the world. Like if you ask ChatGPT about LDS right now, it would talk about the Latter-day Saints. But what I believe in is not just that you can pull anything off the internet, but that when you open these applications that folks like us are building, that there should be an opinion out of the gate that gets you started and contextualizes it and helps you understand what good looks like.
All right. Thanks a ton, Josh. We've got time for one last quick question with a couple quick answers here. So one attendee asked, talking about the information that is leaving the job site through retirees, can you talk about the information that is not coming to the job site? How are you making tech opportunities available to a more diverse workforce? Without different perspectives, AI can be biased. We need many different types of people at the table to keep our industry innovative and growing. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts on that, everybody.
Maybe I'll jump in here. I think this ties very well to the last conversation. The reality of this experiential gap is it's more complicated than people think. Experience, in my opinion, a site superintendent is the most important role in construction. That's my opinion. They're really not a great superintendent until 20 years in the industry. And because experience is actually built through failure, you don't learn as much through your success. And so the problem is that these failures, when you have a 20-year veteran as a superintendent in a situation, they are able to identify so many things from what they've had go wrong in their career in that second, in that split moment. They can see what's going to go wrong in 5 years. They can see what's going to go wrong in 2 minutes. And all of this stuff is coming together to make one decision that, if somebody doesn't have the experience, is going to miss all of it. And so how does software start to solve this? This is not a solved problem right now. I don't even think we're close to it. But where you start to solve it is, I think, back to what I was saying before. The only way software starts to get powered and get stronger is more data being put into it, better data being put into it. How do you start getting those superintendents, those foremen, or those people in the office to start recording their failures and start so that the industry can start learning from that. Because if you want to transfer this knowledge down to the person that's coming next, it's not the success stories. The process can eliminate the risk of some of these failures happening, but it's still not transferring that knowledge. And so in order to do that, we have to find a way where you create this type of knowledge locker where the information that's starting to get generated from or put into the software is actually going through what the superintendent is or that trade worker or anyone is naturally doing and storing in their head, so that somebody that's 10 years earlier in their career can tap into that, put the situation they're in, and potentially learn from it. I mean, this hasn't happened yet, but I think that's the direction you have to start going, because if it's not recorded, you're just going to keep paying the dump tax over and over and over again, right?
Yep. Thanks, Gabe. We've got time for one more quick answer from anybody who'd like to give one.
Just to echo what you'd said, Gabe, earlier on about elementary school, I think that's fundamentally where the problem is going to be solved sooner, is the education that we as technology companies educate the market. With every single construction company, we love when we hear our clients saying they've just visited a high school to educate new folks into the industry. Like, that's ultimately going to solve the problem. It's never going to be, I agree with you, Gabe, you're never going to solve a problem for folks that has 20 years in the industry and that knowledge transfer. You can definitely document that information, so there's great knowledge centers internally, but ultimately, we need to attract more people to the industry, and it starts at the earliest stage. I think naturally with AI and what it's going to do to a lot of jobs, the apprenticeship programs are going to become a lot more attractive and a lot more lucrative because it's going to be such a demand. But I think fundamentally, every construction company needs to have some sort of initiative locally with their community schools and things like that to educate the market on, why the industry is such a great place. Everybody that I know in the industry loves it, right? It's so dynamic, and it's full of problem solving, and there's so many different stakeholders, so many fires to put out. Everybody that I know is just so passionate about the work that they do. And it's almost somewhat a hidden gem when you go into school. It's very little of the percentage want to move into construction. So I think ultimately that's the quickest problem solved. It's not going to be software. It's going to be continue to educate the younger generation on moving to a great industry.
All right. Thanks, Tom. That's going to be it, all the time we have today. I want to take the time to thank everyone for attending and listening to this very informative panel. If you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to the panelists and their companies with more. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And keep an eye out for future webinars that are going to dive into these topics a little bit further. In the meantime, our webinar team is going to be sharing links in the chat that include links to my stuff and along with everybody else on this panel. So thank you all for attending. Thank you to the founders for sharing their time and experience. And I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody.